Next up, we have our first panel discussion on ROI with cloud applications, and cloud infrastructure. It indeed is an honor for me to introduce our renowned contributors. Let's start with our first panelist, His Excellency Belal Hafnawi, Commissioner, Board Member, Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, Jordan. And our second eminent panelist is Mr. Charles Sello, Kungwane, Group Head, City of Johannesburg, Municipality. Our third eminent panelist is Mr. Charles Asamoah, Assah. He is the Regional CIO of Ecobank, eProcess International SA. And our last eminent panelist is Mr. Ian Leslie. He is the Head of IT Portfolio Management at Dangote Industries Limited. Last but not the least, we have our eminent panel moderator, Mr. Mohammed Viqaruddin. He is the Vice President Education at Bahrain IT Professionals Toastmasters Club. I welcome each and every one of you and all the very best for your panel discussion. Over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you for such a nice, wonderful introduction, all the panelists. All are welcome. Special panel topic. Let me introduce myself. She has already made my introduction, but again, I will make it. I am your panel moderator, Mohammed Viqaruddin. And here the panel topic, what the organizing team has arranged for us, ROI with cloud applications, and cloud infrastructure. It is my pleasure. We have our panelist, Madam Brigade, already informed. We have 4 panelists. Number 1, His Excellency Belal, and one more panelist, Mr. Charles Sello. One more panelist, Mr. Charles Asamoah. If I make pronunciation, excuse me for that. We have one more panelist, Mr. Ian Leslie. For that, now the current trend in the whole world looking for cloud during the current situation of the world going through, and everybody is moving to the cloud. And thanks to the organizing committee, they make us to discuss the panel topic on the summit, Hybrid Cloud and Cybersecurity, West Africa 2022. I will not take much time. We'll move on. I will make a question to His Excellency Belal Hafnawi. And everybody, when they invest on the cloud, they're looking for return on investment. So now, His Excellency, I have the question for you. What key factors to be included when calculating cloud return on investment? Over to you, His Excellency.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mohammed. Thanks for everyone who organized this event. And it's my pleasure to be with you at this event, which is valuable for the West African countries who are taking much care about digital transformation. Our topic today is about ROI of the cloud. So what I can see that as a concept, the return on investment, which is ROI, is a success indicator for any project. So when we talk about ROI, the target for the business decision is to lead to a positive impact on the organization bottom line. So in order to measure the ROI, it's simply the increase in the value of investment over a period of time. We can look to the ROI in this methodology. So if the financial benefit outweighs the original investment, the result is a positive ROI, which is our target from the investment. Now, by moving to a public cloud, provider decreases the capital expenditure, which is CapEx, but increases monthly cost. So ROI has both tangible and intangible components, and a complete ROI picture must include factors such as corporate value, customer goodwill, brand value. So the key factors we need to think when calculating the cloud ROI are 5 values or 7 values. The first value is the productivity, that we need to be sure that the cloud adoption enables the business to meet the peak demands rapidly. So the cloud should be adaptive and should meet the demands that we are looking forward. So productivity here can be enhanced and by opportunities gained with comparing without a cloud. So what we gain with the cloud comparing without getting a cloud. So the scalability here is very important for productivity. Second point is leverage. This means that a single cloud platform such as AWS or Azure can provide the organization with the basic infrastructure to manage many applications. Now, on the other hand, the virtualized nature of the cloud services enables resource sharing of virtual machines and the storage pools between multiple departments. So here, cloud providers offer economics of scale that can make a cloud service less expensive than on-premise service and the storage that could be done in many organizations. The third important factor, which is pay as you go, that by eliminating the capital expenditure, the CapEx, organizations pay for only the cloud services actually used in a given time period. So here, the payment will match with the time utilization of the cloud and with the size. So there is no need to prepay for infrastructure necessary to meet peak demands until those peaks occur. So when organizations need to pay only when there's an increased capacity demand in the horizon. And the same is true for software licenses. We only pay for what we need and the time we need. The fourth important point, which is provisioning time. Now, the time to deploy and implement the infrastructure for the cloud is virtually instantaneous. So new projects can be launched immediately rather than waiting for the hardware to be ordered, configured, shipped, or installed. You know, in the classical methodology, in the classical on-premises hardware and software implementation, it takes some time to implement, to deploy, to test, to troubleshoot. And here, there is no strong impact on time to value, since work can begin immediately upon a project approval. Now, if we get a project, we can deploy immediately on the cloud, so we have zero time to wait. So it will be productive immediately. The fifth important point, which is capital spending reduction. Now, migrating application to the cloud eliminates the need to spend for on-premises infrastructure, as well as eliminating support and upgrade requirements. So here we can see that the value of the cloud can reduce the CapEx and reduce the investment, and lower costs is translated to higher profitability and increased ROI. Sixth point, which is access to the new market. Now, cloud will give you faster delivery and low cost, which could be translated to competitive offering, which can open the door to new customers and markets in the world. And the seventh point, which is most important point, one of the most important point, that cloud risk management. Now, calculating the cost of project failure, infrastructure outages, and natural disasters, as well as the ways to mitigate them by a disaster recovery solution, could be highly supported with the cloud compared to the on-premises hardware. These are the main ideas and the main parameters could be considered when calculating the cloud ROI. And these are important factors to be considered. And that's it from my side. If there are any questions, I could answer it either online or offline.
Thank you, His Excellency, for sharing return on investment. I have takeaway. You have highlighted very well about productivity, scalability, pay as you go, the time, capital, new market, and it is very useful insight. I request all the audience, if we have any question, put it into the chat, so we will address in the later stage. Now move on. Now we have another panelist, Mr. Charles Asamoah Assah. And as you know, again, the same topic about return on investment, how we can best to be invest. For that, Mr. Charles Asamoah Assah, what are the considerations that organization need to think about when planning to adopt cloud? and what will give them the best return on investment. So I need your opinion on that. Over to you, Mr. Charles.
Okay, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, organizers, for putting together such a wonderful program. Yes, so my areas will cover three points, which would take care of one. We'll be looking at cost. So in considering cloud, you need to look at the cost. As much as you are moving away from the traditional CapEx model into an OpEx model, you need to look at how best you are going to manage the cost, because with the cloud, you would easily scale up without you having some level of controls around this cloud. Expansion, capacities, and all those things. So one of the things that you need to really consider is to look at how best you can manage your cost, because in the cloud, users would be able to quickly go up and scale up the infrastructure without, if proper controls are not put in place, expanding capacity, and these are all cost-related items which can swell up your operational cost. One of the other things that you need to look at is your performance. In considering moving to the cloud, how is your performance going to be like? You need to look at, you are trying to move to the cloud so that you become more accessible, more scalable, more effective in your cloud approach. So in going to the cloud, I believe you need to consider the performance of the applications or your IT operations that would be in the cloud. Another area that I would be looking at when it comes to this topic is around the application modernization. And traditionally, we have our on-premise infrastructure, which may or not be suitable for the cloud yet. Because you're running on on-prem infrastructure, you may not have tuned these applications to be able to support the cloud technology. So one of the key considerations that you need to have is this application ready for the cloud? Has it been optimized with the latest technologies to be able to effectively and efficiently run on these cloud infrastructure? So these are the key areas that you need to consider when in taking consideration on what would give you the best return on investment. One of the greatest thing, or the last thing that I would want to speak about, looking at the time that we have, is around security and data protection, right? As much as some of these cloud providers will be giving you the basic security for the infrastructure that you host your services on, it might not be enough, especially when you're running a banking institution. You're a banking institution or running having a lot of customer data on this cloud infrastructure. So one of the key things that you need to do is look at whatever the cloud providers are giving you. Is it best? Does it meet the purpose that you intend to? Is it going to secure your environment? Right? If your environment is, if whatever is being provided is good enough for your organization, then you can really go for it. But if it is not, then obviously you need to beef up that security by engaging your security experts to see how best all the loopholes in the infrastructure that has been provided are reinforced to be able to cater for your data protection, the security gaps that they might provide. So for me, these are the three areas that I'll be looking at when it comes to what to consider in choosing the cloud. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. And very well started about most cloud native. They focus on CapEx and OpEx, which is you have highlighted for the IT operation to run the cloud. And I know the pain because mostly those who are running, maintaining, then keep continuing and growing when we use the cloud. So move on. Now we have another distinguished panelist, one more Charles, and we have two Charles. And here we have Mr. Charles Sello Kungwane. And here again, the people, when they are moving from their native infrastructure to the cloud, for to get the benefit to this summit, I have a question for you. What are the potential visible benefits of going cloud or hybrid. These are the two key areas need to be focused. Over to you, Mr. Charles Sello Kungwane.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present to this conference. I'm in South Africa, but I welcome to be with the West African gents to share the knowledge. Firstly, what are the potential benefits that are visible? Because one thing that we must understand when we talk about hybrid or cloud, we don't talk about something that it's not visible. It's an infrastructure that is sitting with someone, whereby we are asking for a service because of there's multiple implications to that. There's cost, there's resource shortage, and there's also keeping up with abreast with technology. So the visible benefits to say that IT is not an island, it's an integrated service in a sense that there's the supply chain, there's a country value chain, there's energy sector, there's a retail sector. So the visible benefits of moving to clouds, one is to say that from energy sector, you are saving cost in terms of the data center that consumes or the infrastructure that consume enough energy that could be saved or utilized for something else. And also from cost of ownership, you are relinquishing what become a high cost intense, which the institutions are not able to measure up to in terms of, because of, if you look at technology, every 3 years, there's a cycle of improvement from infrastructure perspective, and mostly even from the firmware, you have to keep improving. Then from also even in integration and collaboration, when you move to hybrid, you are able to integrate and build center of excellence, whereby knowledge can be shared and resources can be shared. In that way, you are enabling to build better services because of you have, even with a less knowledge pool, but the available resources are able to give positive inputs towards what the country or the institution is trying to build. And one question that from cybersecurity that we raise always to say that who's responsible for cybersecurity, especially when you are going hybrid or going cloud fully. As the customer, you are still accountable for the cybersecurity. One opportunity that most institutions should leverage is to say that you must build the contract that make you aware of what are your accountable, and also when you give responsibilities to the cloud provider, make sure that you are well aware and you can monitor those, and they can be driven from the issue of return on investment and value building, to say that we want to see this entity be a reputable institution. So how can cloud build value and return on investment in this whole process? So you are giving the responsibility and a clear outlined responsibility to the cloud provider. And also one thing is to say that be frank with the cloud provider. If you don't understand the model, let there be a research or like a guidance in terms of transparency, to say that what is it that cloud brings with you? Because of most of the people that adopt cloud, they forget that they also adopted the risk and also the challenges that comes with cloud. So that's all I can share from my end, to say that approach cloud with a caution, and though there's benefits, but understand what you're putting yourself on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles Sello, for your insight share to the audience. Audience, if you have a question, you can put it into the chat. And very well said about visible services, mostly IT integrated services, and resources are available, accountable and monitor. This is very well required into the cloud. Now we have one more distinguished panelist, Mr. Ian Leslie. Now again, the same, our main theme and the topic about return on investment. Now for my panelist, how can organization operating a hybrid environment maximize on ROI? That questions for Mr. Ian Leslie. Over to you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Good afternoon, panelists. Hello, audience. So the panelists have already covered a lot of very important points. So I will keep my answer focused to the hybrid cloud, right? So I know that some organizations have a lot of budget. They can afford to, move large amounts of users in the cloud, or commit a lot of money to having a cloud infrastructure as a service. However, for a lot of other organizations, it's a trade-off, right? You want to keep your on-premise infrastructure in place because of strategic concerns, security concerns, etc. And you also want to take advantage of the cloud space. Right. So if you see, there are mainly two areas which we will focus on. So one is the collaboration, email, things like Office 365, for instance, where you have your SharePoint, your Teams, your OneDrive, your Outlook on the web, Google Suite, etc. And the other one is your infrastructure as a service. So you have your Azure, you have your AWS, Google Cloud, and so on. So the strategy that we use for solutions like Office 365 is careful user segmentation, right? So we basically maintain two different sets of profiles. One is a cloud profile, and the other is an on-prem profile. And of course, the cloud profile is a lot more expensive. So we make it very clear to our customers what the cost profile for a cloud service will be. And we migrate the users according to a set of policies that we have internally. So if using that approach, we're able to balance the trade-offs that we get in the cloud, the benefits of the cloud versus the higher cost effectiveness of a on-premise. So I'm sure most of my panelists will agree with me. It's a lot cheaper to have 10,000 users on Exchange on-premise than to have them on Office 365, for instance. So user segmentation is very key for us, especially. So for instance, we have about 8,000 users total, information users, and the spread is about 50-50. And we use these policies to determine who gets on cloud and who gets on-premise based on usage, based on other factors. The second point is the compute, your networking, your IaaS. So for instance, Azure. So how do you determine what gets on Azure, and how do you determine what stays on premise? So I know that there are some industries like the financial industry where they're governed by regulatory concerns, right? So certain countries may say you cannot keep customer data in the cloud if the cloud storage is not in country. So those are some of the constraints. So in that case, okay, you have to keep it on premise, you have to keep it on your servers. The other factor is increased resiliency. So we do know that putting servers on the cloud, you benefit from that sense of increased resiliency. So if you have high priority, high critical applications, which are not subject to these regulatory concerns, you put them in the cloud. We are hopeful that in the next few years, Microsoft or Amazon will consider putting data centers in the West Africa region. I know that they do in South Africa. I know in East Africa there are plans as well, but we hope that will really drive the adoption, especially for sectors that are governed by these regulations. So that's my brief on that. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ian Leslie, about sharing the trade-off strategy. And number one, you have mentioned very well, especially the application cloud email services, which using by Office 365, as well as you have made well comparison between on-prem, which is using the Exchange services. And the second, very well said about compute, networking, and mostly I like the way which you ask, especially for the latency, which is required AWS, their data center to be on the African region, as well as Azure. Now, move on. Now I would like to request one more panelist to move on for his one more question to Mr. Charles Silo Kungwane. Now, everybody is talking about cloud, moving private and public cloud. And now the question is raising to my mind, who is accountable for cybersecurity in a hybrid cloud deployment, whereas on-prem as well as the cloud? Over to you, Mr. Charles Silo.
Yes, thank you, Mohammed. As the customer, at the end of the day, you are the one that is accountable for your cybersecurity health. Because the reason why I'm saying that, because of you are the data owner, and you are the one who understands the business services and the business processes. That's why in my second view, when I shared my side, is to say that it's up to the business or the customer to build things like SLA, service management agreement, whereby you highly stipulate to say like who is accountable for what, and how do you get transparency over that, and how will you manage that? In that way, you can even track your deficiencies to say that are they being looked after, and you can even to say that look from cost perspective to say over the time, is there reduction in terms of problem? Because over time, when you adopt something, it should start as a bigger problem or as a smaller problem, but over time it should reduce and give you efficiency and effectiveness on how the service is being used. And from cost perspective and risk, the exposure should minimize. In that way, you'll be knowing that you are benefiting from the service that you are consuming. So as the customer, you are responsible and you are accountable, and the cloud provider is you can provide responsibility to the cloud provider. Thank you.
Thank you for one more wonderful thought about service management, adaptability. Now we have one more Charles, Asamoah, Assah. Now, as I have seen, when we are moving our on-prem, the as is to the cloud, and we are really concerned about licensing. So, Mr. Charles Asamoah, for the question for you, how do you deal with your on-prem licenses when migrating to cloud?
That is a difficult one, right? It's one of the pain areas in most organizations when moving from on-prem to the cloud. But I mean, this is where you need to have a conversation with your CSP. The CSP meaning the cloud service provider. Typically for the infrastructure license, like your database licenses and the other things, most of these OEMs do not let you innovate it from one place to the other. So if, for instance, I am migrating from, let's say, Oracle database to an Oracle cloud environment, obviously that conversation needs to be had with the OEM to say, yes, I have these licenses which are perpetual to me, but I am still taking a service from you. So how do I cannot keep my licenses with me without any value from it. So you need to have that conversation with them to say, okay, I have the licenses here. I am taking a service from you. I need to be able to novate the licenses from my on-prem license stack into the cloud service stack, and then look at how best you can deal with the contractual details out of it. But unfortunately, if they say no, then obviously you need to take a decision on how you're going to amortize these licenses over the period that has been purchased and then incur that cost over the cloud. But for the application stack, obviously some of these licenses, once I'm moving from one application which is used on-prem onto the cloud, it's easy to novate the licenses to the new service that is in the cloud. So these are conversations needs to be had with either the CSP or the application vendor to be able to know how you are going to treat these licenses. If you do not have that conversation and you go with the assumption that, okay, my license would either go or stay, then obviously you would be incurring additional cost on the cloud side if you do not novate to those licenses. And then your cost for cloud migration would be high, which would in turn not meet the return on investment that you intend to have on the cloud migration. So for me, the conversation must always be had with the supplier and then the OEM, infrastructure OEM, to say, yes, this is my license footprint, and this is how, guide me on how best to move away from or to deal with it.
Thank you, Mr. Charles, because as I have something similar to that. When we are having already a license, again, we are taking one more license, but there is the option we can move our license to the cloud. Now I have one panelist, Mr. Ann Wesley. Now, when we are moving our on-prem infrastructure or whatever as its location, moving to the cloud, now morely we are focusing on how we can organize securing the cloud infrastructure to minimize the risk of security breaches in terms of moving to the cloud. Over to you, Mr. Ann Wesley.
Thank you, Mohammed. So the key consideration when we move to the cloud is the increased risk of security breaches, because your surface area is slightly increased because you don't have the same level of control, especially if you have users accessing the services, cloud services from outside your company network. Now you could put in policies to say that access to cloud resources are only in a very controlled manner, but then that would defeat some of the flexibilities of the cloud, right? So two strategies that we have used that worked very well. The one is a difficult one, but very important, is to ensure that your endpoints are secured very well. You're only as weak as your weakest endpoint. So ensuring that you have good device management, ensure that all your company devices are patched to the latest update and are running the latest antivirus, whether you're using Windows Defender or any other third-party licenses. And also, in conjunction with that, you need to have a good security team, good monitoring team that's continuously assessing these threats that come in and proactively blocking and monitoring, right? The second thing, which has worked wonders for us and really, in my opinion, reduces the risk of breaches by about 80%, is multi-factor authentication. I really cannot stress this enough. In the last year, after the pandemic, when remote work became more of a thing, we rolled out multi-factor authentication to all our users. Previously, it used to be only for IT administrators and VIP users, but we decided after the pandemic, everybody has to have MFA. It was a difficult project. Change management was very difficult. And the users initially took almost a few weeks to a few months for them to stop complaining, because it can be very irritating at first. But that really, really cut down the risk of incidents for us and made us to really sleep better at night. So those are my two takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Charlie. Very well said. because if your endpoint is secure, then only we can work very well. And in this situation, I have also noticed most of the organization, those who are ignoring about especially multi-factor authentication, and in this situation, they are accepting. Now, move on. Now we have, at the end of the day, again, mostly whatever you are invested on security, compliance, all those things. Now we have His Excellency. For you, the question is that now everything we have invested on the cloud. Now, what are the key takeaways about cloud return on investment? Over to you.
Thank you again, Mohammed. Over the last couple of years, cloud computing has drifted into mainstream of the enterprises. So the conversation here has shifted from whether to deploy clouds or how to use them strategically and maximize return on investment. So here, to be sure, cloud represent very different CapEx and OpEx models. So we need to be sure about what to deploy and how to deploy. So it's clear that clouds introduce formidable challenges for IT and line of business leaders. So it's very difficult to clearly identify and measure all the benefits of the cloud. However, we can think about 5 key factors that any CIO or senior executive or any decision maker in the company who should have focus on them in order to fully gauge the value of the clouds. So the first point, that the cloud isn't just about numbers. When it comes to the cloud, you cannot view return on investment as strictly as money issue. So it's important to understand how cloud capabilities change your business model and enable new features and capabilities, but also create a new or different risk to the organization. So you really have to understand what your business model dictates and how they fit in strategically. The second important factor, that focus on the process, not technology. So here, the cloud isn't really about technology. It's about business processes and making them more efficient. So organizations that achieve outstanding results typically identify how the cloud can rewire a process, workflows and tasks in a more efficient way. So this includes connecting multiple digital technologies. So in order to maximize the results, an organization must break down the silos and get the most benefit of a cloud and change on the processes. The third important factor, that not all clouds are created equal. In reality, the term cloud computing is used to describe a vast array of tools, technologies, and services. So not all the clouds are equal, not all the solutions are equal, not all the deployments are equal. So it's important to remember that the clouds can range from niche SaaS, like software as a service, and it can be infrastructure as a service, which is more advanced, and development platforms known as a platform as a service PaaS. So here, clouds can also range from pricey private clouds to far less expensive public or hybrid offerings. So moreover, companies in the same managed service space can offer significantly different delivery and the pricing models to run in the same organization. And most important point, that not surprisingly, the return associated with different approaches and vendors can vary significantly. So, and even the way an organization or vendor measure results can skew ROI numbers. So here it's important to conduct due diligence. So some organizations are looking to transform IT service delivery and reduce total cost of ownership, and others are hoping to transform business operations and customer engagement through mobility applications. So how you measure the return under these different scenarios can be very different. The fourth important point, that to find the right vendors. Sometimes you can end up getting, there's a statement saying that you can end up getting a Cadillac when all you need is a Volkswagen. So if you overpay or a vendor under deliverables or something you don't need it, it will impact you negatively and impact return on investment. So it's wise to look beyond basic pricing models and understand the type of firms vendors cater and why. So we need to take care about not only about the price, about the firm itself, about the solution. So some cloud service providers target big corporates and other vendors focus on small firms. In order to achieve the best ROI or optimal ROI, the service offering and the pricing level must be in sync, adapted to your organization. And finally, pricing doesn't always correlate with offering and the quality of service. Some cloud vendors are willing to assist with system integration, data migration. So these ancillary services can shorten the ROI window and boost other gains that directly related to the numbers. And last and not least, use metrics and measures, but don't overweight them. Here, conventional ROI formulas don't always work in the cloud. Applying these methods leads to confusing, if not deceptive results. So with the cloud computing, stipulating that the hard money ROI will be achieved in the form of saving, and it's likely to net you more heritage than a cost break. So here we need also to focus among the factors that may provide soft ROI, like agility, flexibility, scalability, improve the process, streamline development platforms, and more strategic use of IT resources. So in fact, an overemphasis on ROI can place the focus in wrong place. So we don't need to think blindly in the ROI. We need to think in a positive, subjective manner how to utilize the best of the ROI, like improving customer relationships, driving gains, and enhancing the customer environment. And at the end, it's important, as a summary, it's important to think strategically and look for ways to improve processes that deliver business gains. So which requires a broad input from across the organization, a different relationship between IT and line of business users, and understanding that cost and ROI must take a back seat to value, and an ability to become a faster, better, more competitive enterprise. So this is my insights about the ROI and the key takeaways that we could get from cloud.
Thank you, His Excellency, about sharing your return on investment. I have lots of questions related to return on investment on the cloud and the key issue in balancing the cloud computing to adopt a digital transformation, and how to create the framework for the success, classification of the structure, your data implementing, and identity access management. Lots of questions I have. The world is changing faster than ever. Digital technologies are bringing about unprecedented transformation, changing our work lives, the way we are digital transforming our day-to-day IoT, big data, social media, cloud computing, blockchain, and lots of things. But due to time constraints, we cannot take more questions from you. And the organizing team is watching us to wind up. And I thanks to organizing committee, first of all, and as well as to our distinguished panelists, His Excellency, his time, and Mr. Charles, and we have one more Charles, and we have Ian. And that's it from my side. And I have thanks to organizing committee one more time, giving me the opportunity to be as a panel moderator. And I hope the next upcoming sessions maybe will get more time to get more engaged with the moderator. That's it from my side. And back to you, our master of ceremonies.
Thank you very much to our eminent panel members, His Excellency Belal Hafnawi, Mr. Charles Sello, Mr. Charles Assah, and Mr. Ian Leslie, and of course our moderator, Mr. Mohammed Viqaruddin, for the interactive and extremely insightful panel discussion around ROI with cloud applications, and cloud infrastructure. If there are any questions, we will definitely be emailing it to you for your consideration. Thank you once again for giving us your precious time for this summit. I hope all of you have a lovely day ahead.